In his best-selling book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, author Stephen R. Covey explained that between stimulus and response, there is a gap. This gap is where we're able to choose the response to the stimulus. If you're interested in learning how to widen the gap, stay tuned. My name is Troy Love. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work at Yuma Counseling Services. For those struggling with an impulsive or addicted brain, the gap between the stimulus and the response is very, very tiny. An idea about using his drug of choice pops into his brain, and then without thinking any more about it, he immediately acts on that impulse, pulls out his drug of choice, and uses it. Perhaps you've experienced something similarly. You're standing in the line at a grocery store waiting to check out, and you see a bar of your favorite candy staring at you. Without giving a second thought, you throw it into the basket with the rest of the items and purchase it a few minutes later. Earlier this year, my daughter had her biannual dental checkup. Her dentist adamantly told my wife that my daughter was going to need braces. Apart from the fact that my daughter's teeth were growing in skiwampus, there was another issue. The width of her palate was too narrow, and thus her molars and the other back teeth on either side of her mouth were too narrow, and there wasn't any room for her teeth in the front to come in. My wife had the same issue growing up and didn't get braces. For her to get the issue fixed now, as an adult, she would most likely have to undergo oral surgery where the top of her palate is split down the center and then pulled apart. That sounds incredibly painful. Luckily for my daughter, the intervention was less extreme. The orthodontist placed a simple device in my daughter's mouth called a rapid palatal expander. This small device is connected to her teeth on either side of her mouth and stretches across her palate. Every night, I would insert a small key into the expander and twist the device about 90 degrees. With every twist, it pushed the teeth apart very slightly. After using the device for a month, only twisting it once a day, my daughter's palate spread wide enough to no longer have her dental issue, and thus making room for her teeth in the front to grow straight. It occurred to me that we can apply the same principle to widening the gap of our impulsivity. The addict will often make pie-crust promises, easily made and easily broken, that he'll never use again. But when those impulses hit, that promise flies out the window. What needs to happen is that we widen the gap in the same manner that we widen the gap in my daughter's mouth, a little bit every day. One way to get started is called, "What do I really want?" To do this, we envision how we want our lives to be and create a picture in our mind in minute detail about what we want our lives to look like. One way to do this is by creating a vision board, by cutting out pictures that remind us of what we want and pasting them on poster board that we can look at every day. Another way is by completing a one-page journal entry that describes what we want for our future. Many professionals call this the one-page miracle, and an example can be downloaded here. When we have this picture in our mind and we're standing in the aisle at the grocery store, staring down at that bar of chocolate, we can pull up the image in our mind about what we want. And in that moment, we have widened the gap. We have given ourselves a nanosecond longer to consider what we want before we make our choice. Perhaps we'll still reach for the candy bar, but we were successful in widening the gap just a little bit. The next time we're standing in the aisle, we can imagine our future healthy selves for 2 seconds before making the choice, and then 3 seconds, and so on. As we widen the gap, it gives us time to consider what will be the best choice for ourselves. Another strategy for widening the gap is playing it to the end. This strategy focuses on what the consequences will be if we engage in this behavior. Initially, we may not think about the consequences at all because the gap is so narrow. But if we feel the temptation and ask ourselves, what will happen if I do this? That twists the key slightly and expands the gap, even if it's only 2 millimeters. And once we've asked the question, we can begin imagining the consequences. For every consequence we consider, we expand the gap. What are some other ways you use to widen the gap? I'd love to read your comments below. Now, I have to admit that sometimes my daughter and I forgot to twist the key. The orthodontist warned us that that might happen. Her advice was, if that happens, remember to twist it again the next day, and add another day at the end of the recommended month. There was no shaming us for forgetting to widen the gap. There was only encouragement to try again the next day. For most of us who battle with shame, it's so easy to punish ourselves after acting impulsively. That's a very effective way of closing the gap instead of widening it. The pain and the discomfort that accompanies the shame leads us to be more impulsive. Instead, it would be more effective to embrace the attitude of the orthodontist. If you missed the twist, try again tomorrow. Over time, as we mindfully focus on how we can widen the gaps of our own decisions, we'll notice that the gap becomes wider. We may find ourselves standing in the aisle at the supermarket, staring down at that bar of chocolate and hearing ourselves say, "That looks good, but feeling better about myself is so much more fulfilling." And then choosing to focus on something else. The addict may find himself going one day without using his drug of choice, and then 2 days, and then 5 days, using the same principles taught to my daughter and I by the orthodontist, widening the gap one day at a time. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please click on the subscribe button below. Thank you, and may peace be with you.